Thanks, Ben. Well, great to be together. What an amazing topic to be considering. And it's the first of a bunch, and we're going to start with this one particularly because it's so foundational in many ways. We're looking at the question, if there is a God, why doesn't he not make himself more obvious? Why doesn't he make himself more obvious? This is a question I think that everyone's asking in some fashion. If you're someone who sees yourself as a follower of God, in relationship with God, you'll be asking this question. If you're someone who's never had any kind of relationship with God, or at least there's a very distant sense about these, you'll be asking the question. So those that are in relationship with God, you'll find yourself asking this question during moments of the deep, dark night of the soul. Where is God? How come he's not right close all the time? Where is he? How come he's not more visible? But for those of you who haven't got any kind of connection with God or don't sense that, you'll be finding yourself, how come he doesn't just turn up? How come he doesn't, have a vision or a miracle or something to make me understand and know that he's there? You'll be asking the question in some fashion as well. This is so common to many people. Why is God not as visible as he ought? It's so foundational. We're tackling it this very first one. But as you've heard, there'll be a bunch of these topics in the next 3 weeks as well. Well, what I want to do with this first one is start with a kind of an introductory comment, and actually then a long introduction before we get to the actual issue of the visibility of God. And here's the introductory comment, then an introductory comment is this: we're going to start in one place and end in another. We're going to start in one place and then end in another. We'll start with a question for God. And the question for God is, what's he doing? Why is he doing it the way he's doing it? If I were God, you might find yourself, if I were God, and I would make myself more obvious. I would do more ready miracles and visions and dreams. I would make it myself more obvious. Why isn't he doing it this way? So it starts with this question about God, and that's a legitimate question. But it ends in another place. It is a confronting place where this will end, because it ends close. It ends actually up with raising questions about us, our hearts, and how we are. Which means we start with a kind of spotlight on God, and then as we'll go through this morning, we'll end up with the spotlight back on ourselves. And in fact, we're going to start there and then back. We'll swing between those two things as we work on the introduction before we come to the actual issue particularly. And I'm conscious this is touchy and sensitive. I'm conscious that lots of people, you've come here this morning and you have a genuine question, and I'm conscious that there's some sort of challenge around it then turning in on you. So I beg your patience. You are right to ask this question of God, but you just didn't come thinking it was going to turn onto you. So I beg your patience that you might bear with us. It matters that we think about it like this. It matters to make sense of the whole topic, that we do both God and us. And to start, I want to show you why this is the case. I want to give you a flavour, a sense of this by showing you a video. Now, it's a video of a very famous atheist, a world-known atheist, a man called Richard Dawkins. Who knows Richard Dawkins? Quick sense. Yeah, okay, great numbers of us. He's a scientist and has been for many years spruiking the thought of atheism. He wrote the book The God Delusion, one of the best sellers. And as we go through this video, I want you to be, don't make any noises. He doesn't come off looking great, but we don't need to add the pain to that. So just please respect him as an image bearer of God, and I'll draw out some implications of what he says. So show some respect as we listen to this, but let me see if we can follow this through. It only goes for a minute.
What would it take for you to believe in God?
Well, I used to say it would be very simple. It would be, the second coming of Jesus, or a great big, deep, booming bass Paul Robeson voice. Saying, I am God and I created. But I was persuaded mostly by actually Steve Zara, who's a regular contributor to my website, richarddawkins.net. He more or less persuaded me that even if there was this booming voice and the second coming in clouds of glory, the more probable explanation is that it's a hallucination or a conjuring trick by David Copperfield or something. He made the point that a supernatural explanation for anything is incoherent, that it just doesn't it doesn't add up to an explanation for anything.
So what would persuade you?
Well, I'm starting to think nothing would. Which in a way goes against the grain, because I've always paid lip service to the view that a scientist should change his mind when evidence is forthcoming. The trouble is, I can't think what that evidence would look like.
Did you get it? I used to pay lip service to the idea that as a scientist, when evidence came, I'd change my mind, but I'm now no longer in that position, or there's words to that effect. What he should be is someone who's open to new evidence and changing his opinion in light of the evidence. But what's emerged, and he's now saying, or he was saying some time ago, is that there's no possibility of him changing his mind because there's no evidence that would change his mind. Which effectively means he's come to the whole question of God, his visibility, whether he's there or not, with a conclusion built in, and he is determined now not to hear what evidence might mean, which means, as he reflects on whether we reflect on the question of is God visible or not, is he made himself visible, should he make himself more visible, there's something going on for us. And I dare say, for Richard Dawkins perhaps, it wouldn't matter if God did make himself more visible. The issue for him isn't a lack of evidence, but a lack of willingness to consider the evidence that might be there. Do you see what's happened for him? This takes us into a very serious concern in this conversation. There'll be two sides to the issue, you see. There will be the question of, could God make himself more obvious? And we'll wrestle with that. But there's another side to it, which is, would it matter if he did? Would you be willing to receive it if he did? This becomes a question not so much of what's there to be seen, but whether you want to see it, which becomes a question of your own heart and your own attitude towards God. Would you be willing to have God be God in your life if the evidence was there that he was God? That's the issue. Which therefore means it's not just about God anymore, it's about us. Do you see how the spotlight's turned? Now, I want to do with this some care. I know you've come here perhaps wanting to think about these things in a genuine way. That's wonderful. But just be alert, there's two sides to it. So let's jump into the God side first. And the fact is, he is less visible than he otherwise could be. And the Bible, which I take to be God revealing himself to us actually, but the Bible itself tells us that's the case. He was more visible in the Garden of Eden. He walked with our first parents in the garden. He was there with them. And he will be more visible at the last day when he returns again, so says the Bible. He'll come in such a way that every knee will bow, every tongue confess. So whether you believe this or not, the point the Bible's making is he's less visible now than he was or will be. It is possible for him to be more visible. And in fact, there are a number of passages in the Bible that tells us a little bit more than this. Micah chapter 3, Isaiah 45, Matthew 11. You can chase these up. It tells us that at times God hides himself. He could be more visible than he otherwise is, which begs the question for us, well, why is he not as visible as he could be? What do we make of all of this? What I want to do is take you through that reading that we had. Ben read for us a part of the Bible from Acts chapter 17 and let it give us some of the thoughts about this rather than just hear from me, because that'll be boring. But let's hear what the Bible has to say about this and focus particularly on that speech in Acts chapter 17. It's where one of the very first followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, someone who claimed to have seen him raised from the grave, dead then alive again. It's the Apostle Paul going into a city called Athens, where there are great philosophies, great thinkers. I don't know if you know your ancient world very well, but we often imagine them to be illiterate and foolish and primitive. They were very sophisticated, very thoughtful. Anyway, the Apostle Paul goes to this town, this city, and he speaks to them in the very context where all the philosophers gathered. Paul stood in that place and spoke. And he spoke in the context of having seen their great religiosity. He says, as I walked around, I've seen all the objects of worship. I've even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So he sees this group of people wanting to actually pay attention to the gods, and they're also wanting to make sure they've covered all their bases. They've got an altar to a God they don't even know might be there, just in case there isn't one they've missed. And he realises they're very religious. But he says to them this, that which you are ignorant of, I'm going to proclaim to you. Now, does that not sound arrogant? That which you're ignorant of, I'm going to fix. Again, bear with me on this, because as we go, I think you'll find it's not so much arrogance as clarity. Let me read to you verse 24. Here's his speech. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. The God who made the world and everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples built by human hands. True, or just someone else's thought? Well, I would often know that we're in touch with something that must be true if we're talking about the true God. That is, if we're talking about the God who truly created the heavens and the earth, the whole of the created order, if he is the author of that, then he by implication must be over it. He must be the Lord of heaven and earth. If there is a God, he is the creator, and therefore he cannot be caged within his creation. The Apostle Paul is just working out the very clear implications of what it is to believe in a God who is the creator. He can't be reduced to a box. He can't be kept under lock and key. He is God. He is over. He's outside. He's beyond. And he keeps going, verse 25. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life, breath, and everything else. If he is God, we need him. He doesn't need us. He's not locked in a building where we need to bring offerings to keep him fed. We don't need to keep him clean. We don't need to make sure he's upright all the time. He is God. He created the very box. He can't be kept in the box. He's the one who gives us life, breath, and everything else. Now, this has massive implications. Just sit with it for a moment. This is my introduction, you see, before we come to the issue. But you see, this has massive implications. The logic of it is if there is a God, he must be this kind of God. All-powerful, supreme in all of existence, the one who has given existence its existence, the one who is over all, outside all, and beyond all. Now, the illustration I've found helpful over many years is one that people who have thought about these things a lot have used for many years, many centuries. It's the book illustration. I have another book here. It's the illustration of the author. So just imagine, I'm going to read from this shortly, but just imagine a book. There is an author who is the one who creates the book. He creates all the words. He creates the characters. He creates the plot. The book is his creation. He gets it printed and so on. And so the author is over the book. He's outside of the book. He can't be bound by the book. He's sovereign over the book. That's the nature of the author of the book, you see. This is the nature of it. If there is a God who has created existence, us in the book, then he is the God who sits over the creation he has made. Do you see? These things make sense. He is supreme. He wrote it. He printed it. He can change it. He can cast it however he chooses. And from the perspective of the characters within the book, and now I'm stretching the illustration a little bit, giving them self-consciousness, these characters in the book. From the perspective of the characters within the book, the God who made our story, our world, our life, doesn't live in the pages of the book. It's completely a category error to imagine that somehow a character in the book can scratch one of the pages and try and find the author. Sort of cut the book and see if we can get the author. He's not in the book like that. He's over it. He's outside of it. He's other than the characters in the book. He is the Lord of heaven and earth, says Paul. He gave us life, breath, and everything else. He does not need us. We need him. There's a logic here, I think, that's unassailable. If there is a God who has the power to be the creator God, if there is that kind of God, he must therefore be Lord over all that is created and not dependent on us. We're laying foundations. This is the introduction. And then you come to verse 27 of this speech, or verse 26. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he has marked out their appointed times in history, the boundaries of their lands. This creator God is sovereign over the bringing forth of the human character within the story that he has written, and he has set the places and times. Now, verse 27 now begins to tell us something that you cannot discern from logic. Verse 27 tells us that God did this for a reason. He did this so that we might seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. I think all the other, if there is a creator, if we are an existence that's come from a creator, you can see all the logic that flows from that he would be sovereign over, the Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't need us, we need him. All of these things follow. But this is a truth that doesn't follow, that's revealed, that the Apostle Paul brings, saying God, the God who has done all of this, the powerful God, is personal. And he's a personal God who actually wants relationship with his creatures. He has done all of these things that we would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. Now, this therefore brings us back to the question, if that's what he wants, why doesn't he make it easier? Why doesn't he make himself more obvious? Well, I'm going to say there's two reasons. There's a reason in God, who he is and what he's like, and there's a reason in us. These two things, the spotlight on God, spotlight on us. In God, what's the reason in God? Well, this is why the introduction. And let me underline this. If all that's been said of God the Creator is true, then he is not an object of our study. He is not another creature that we can put in a test tube. He is not one bound by us at our beck and call. He doesn't owe us. We owe him. This is fundamental and flows from all that he is and all what he is like and who he is. And it must be true, I'm suggesting, if he is God. If there is a first cause, a personal being that has given rise to the existence that we have, he must be this kind of God. Now, this is very hard for us to buy into, even those of us who do believe in God. People think a lot about God today. The vast majority of humanity are convinced there's a divine being. In fact, I don't know if you've noticed, but atheism is declining. More and more atheists are actually converting to religion, to Christian faith. But the most popular way of thinking about God is that he's like a therapist. If there is a God that's there, many of us imagine he's there to be the one who comes in to fix me up. The reason he exists is for me, and we do a very me-centric view of the universe and the existence of God in that he's there for me. So all of my problems, everything that goes wrong for me, he's there, he ought to rush in and fix it up. Whenever I call, he ought to be there. There's something in us that keeps reducing God and minimising God and bringing him down so that in the end he's at our mercy, needing to answer to us. And I would offer the most critical thing in our time to come to terms with is the first part of this speech from Acts chapter 17. That if we do believe there is a God, then this is the kind of God that he must be. He is the creator. He is the author of existence. He cannot be bound by existence. He doesn't sit within existence. He is over existence. He is the Lord of existence. The author writes and rewrites as he chooses. He must have power that is immeasurably beyond what we can comprehend or understand. He gave us all that we have. We need him. He does not need us. He cannot live in temples built by human. He doesn't be contained in... He is God. Now we find ourselves asking from within his creation, why has he not made himself more obvious? What's with him? Now we need to take care. Just picture a group of Year 8 students at Erina High School. Wonderful school, wonderful students. So I'm not, just be careful there. But a group of Year 8 students, they are meeting together at lunchtimes as an extracurricular activity, which probably suggests it's not Erina Heights we're talking about. But anyway, Erina High School. But they're meeting together at lunchtime for extracurricular activity, and they're learning about the issues of justice and history. And as they've been getting together, they're becoming more and more outraged by the British monarchy. This is a beautiful thing. And they're outraged by the behaviours of the kings and the queens in the British monarchy and the way they've treated their satellite and what they've done. And they've determined to write to the king to express their outrage and demand that he presents himself to their council at lunchtime at Erina High School on February the 20th. I don't know if that's a school day, but they'd meet on weekend because they're so keen. And they demand that the king presents himself to answer their charge against him. Now, the king receives the letter. How should the king respond? Think with me about this. Hands up who expects him to jump on the first plane he can to rush out to answer the charge. No one thinks he's going to do that, right? Push it a little bit further. Who thinks he should jump on a plane and rush out to answer the charge? Are there Republicans amongst us? Even if you're a Republican, you don't think he should, because you intuitively have this sense that who are Year 8 students to demand of their king that he must front before them? You kind of have this intuition that there's an order issue here, there's a relational issue here that is inappropriate to... Now that's human to human. The point I want to make with you is we are talking about creatures with our Creator, with the Lord of heaven and earth. As we come to this topic, we come with humility and care and recognition that He has the right to reveal Himself to us as little or as much as He chooses. He does not owe us. He's in control. He is rightly in control of how much He reveals of Himself. And He does that making Himself visible or hiding Himself or more visible as He chooses. Okay, but still, you find yourself going, well, look, you've said He wants everyone to believe. You've said He wants relationship with us. Well, we're still with the question, why has He not made Himself more visible? He has in the past and He will in the future, and He says sometimes He hides, so He could do more. Why doesn't He do more? We're back to that question. Because of a deeper purpose going through all of this. God's purpose in what He has chosen to do, and remember, He's the Lord of heaven and earth who can choose to do what He pleases. There's a purpose in what He is choosing to do in this particular age that we live in. And His purpose is to do something in us. What is that? What is He seeking in us by what He is doing? He is seeking to bring us to humility. Humility. Remember again this verse that I mentioned, verse 27. God did all of this so that we would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from any one of us. Listen to another place in the Bible that says the same kind of thing in Jeremiah chapter 29. God gives a prophet in Jeremiah to say this: "You will find me if you seek me with all your heart." You will find me if you seek me with all your heart. Do you see what the writer is saying, what God is saying through this author? You won't find me if you're insincere. You won't find me if you're just playing a game. You will only find me if you come in sincerity, genuinely seeking to find. God's purpose is to do something in us. I am God, you serve me, not me you. This is a massively important principle. God is not far from us. He's there to be found if you want to find Him, which is where the spotlight comes on us. You may, and many have said, God's not visible, it's not really my fault. But what I'm suggesting is the Bible is teaching the reason you actually aren't finding what you say you want to find is because you don't really want to find it. And so the spotlight comes on us. One of the tests, I think, for your sincerity, our sincerity in the search is, would you be willing to have God be God if you found that there was a God? And if you find yourself going, I'm not sure I want Him to be God, then we're back with Dawkins. I suspect that you actually don't have a heart that really wants the God who is there. God has given us enough evidence to find Him if you want to find Him, but not so much evidence that you're forced to know Him against what you want. Now let me take you through this. there is evidence for God. Let me take you through some of this very briefly, very inadequately, but we've only got a short amount of time. But it needed the massive introduction that I've given to you, because this issue isn't just about God revealing himself, it's about whether we want to find him. Do you see? So let me give you the evidence that is there. The evidence really sits in two big packages. There's a vast amount in each of them. One of the packages is just what you see in the world around us. The other package of evidence is in God unambiguously, intentionally and deliberately stepping into the light. There's two kinds of God revealing himself. Let me give you the first one, the big package of ways in which God has revealed himself. The Bible would put it like this, that the world around us, the heavens, declare the glory of God. They reveal the reality of a God. So that by what has been made, we can know that there is a God of divine power and immense spiritual. There's a God. Now, how is this the case? Well, let me give you some quotes here. Einstein. Let me give you an Einstein quote. We're in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books. Now, what Einstein is capturing here is the sense that as you enter into the huge expanse of the creation and the world around us, you sense that it's a library of books. It's not just a chaotic jumble. There is something about the nature of the world that I enter into that even a child knows. This didn't happen by accident. There must be an author. Now, I think that's a hugely helpful insight there, because the child may not be able to articulate all the reasons and all the evidences and all the arguments, but there's an intuition that knows. And I think that's the case for many of us. That's why the vast, vast majority of the world just has this intuition. And you often can't put words to it. It is there to be seen in the complexity, the order, the beauty, the wisdom of the world around us. It screams design. It's no accident. God is there to be seen. Listen to another quote here, Freeman Dyson. Freeman, a theoretical physicist, mathematician, he's died now, but he was Princeton University. He was given a lifelong tenure there, a very sharp, clever man. The more I examine the universe and study the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe in some sense knew we were coming. That there's a design, there's a richness, complexity, a shape to it. Now, this is seen in the macro. Science has taken us deeper into the large things. I could just give you a taste of it, the fine-tuning of the universe. Are you aware of some of these issues that the scientist world has recognised there's a big bang, there's an expansion of the universe that's happening that you can trace all the way back to a beginning, a singularity, the Big Bang. But on the basis of the Big Bang, for it to have worked, what scientists have recognised is there needs to be an incredibly finely tuned balance between the forces causing it to expand and the forces necessarily in the matter and the atomic forces and pulling it back together. If they're not finely tuned, the universe would just collapse back in or explode right out. And that it actually expands the way it does indicates incredible fine-tuning of the two forces as they operate together. But you also get, just in terms of our solar system and the nature of it, the fact that we have a sun that is exactly the right kind of sun, the right distance from the Earth, with the moon exactly the right distance in the way it functions, with the Earth having the right gravitational forces, with the atmosphere exactly the way it is, the crust and the thickness of the crust and the way all of these things, the tilt of the axis, the seasons, these things are so finely tuned that life is only possible because of the tuning that we experience where we're at. It's called the Goldilocks zone that we're in. These things there's a beauty too. It's not just the tuning and it's not just the incredible display of the design that's there, but there's a beauty to it. When you have a big bang, an explosion, there's only one kind of explosion that looks beautiful. We've seen them on New Year's Eve. You know, there's an explosion that does look beautiful. What is it? Fireworks. But what's essential for fireworks to look beautiful? Someone's designed it. It didn't just happen. When your car blows up, you don't go, wow, beautiful. You know what I mean? Explosions by their nature, but when they're designed, you see, a big bang explosion emerges into beauty instead of chaos. There's a beauty to our world. The skies proclaim the handiwork, but even humankind, humanity, we aren't just another animal. We're different, but we're not different by just a magnitude of kind. We're different by order. Our sense of morality, our sense of truth and false, right, wrong, good, evil, these aren't just useful survival categories. So nature is red in tooth and claw. Nature is the survival of the fittest. This is the kind of Darwinian sense of things, that the universe exists on the basis of the powerful survive, the weak get crushed, and that's just the way it is, except in humans. Of all the creatures, we're actually committed by moral category to the weak. We are committed to the survival of the weak. Where did that come from? How did that emerge? Good, evil, right, wrong, human dignity, the value that we attribute to a human to have rights. Who said we have rights? Well, that intuition about who we are as unique as humans within the animal kingdom has been given to us. It speaks of a creator who has given it to us. Look at A.N. I've got another quote here. A.N. Wilson, a British atheist philosopher. He was converted from atheism in 2009. It's an incredible movement that's happening. Materialistic atheism says we are just a collection of chemicals. It has no answer whatever to the question of how we should be capable of love or heroism or poetry if we are simply animated pieces of meat. It's exactly right. How have we got what we've got? And then there's human consciousness. These things, I love these things, and I don't want to... Let me give you another quote here. Thomas Nagel, an atheist, but a philosopher who has written a book called Mind and Cosmos. It's an extraordinary thing that exploded on the philosophical world, where he's been kind of ostracised because he's now saying you cannot reduce the sense of human consciousness down to matter. There therefore must be something alongside the material, which is non-material, mind. And he's then pushed back to the universe and said there must be something beyond the matter of the universe, a mind behind it all. Now, I don't know how that makes him no longer still an atheist, but there we are. It's extraordinary to think these things through. And then we have Ayaan Hirsi Ali, another atheist, a friend of Richard Dawkins, actually still very good friends with Richard Dawkins, but she and her husband have been converted. Atheism failed to answer a simple question: what is the meaning and purpose of life? A child walks into the library of the universe and goes, this didn't happen by accident. You know, it has been said that science has to be granted 5 free miracles before it can then do its work. And its first miracle is that how did something come from nothing? Second, how did order come from chaos? Third, how did life come from non-life? Fourth, how did consciousness come from non-consciousness? And fifth, how did transcendence come from consciousness? How is it that humans, of all conscious creatures, have a transcendent consciousness to reflect on life and to think about why we're here and what's the purpose? You do not see a bunch of meerkats sitting around at sunset, marvelling at the sunset and wondering why we're here. But we do. God has not left himself without testimony. It's there to be seen if you're happy to see it. But more. He has chosen to do something more explicit, more direct. He has spoken to us in human words. That's this book. He has raised up prophets to speak in ways that can be verified. These prophets have not just spoken ideology or philosophy or morality. They've spoken about the future that can be tested. God has done this. But further to this, he's done even more. He has come in his own person into the book that he has written. In the most incredible miracle, the invisible God has made himself visible in time and place, in history, in the kind of history that we have access to. He has stepped into his creation in the person of Jesus. The author of the book has written himself into the very book as one of the characters in the book. What this meant for God the Creator is mind-boggling. It's a unique claim of the Christian faith. It's the one religion that says this, that God became a creature in verifiable time. Not just in mythology, not just in a far and distant land that we don't know about, but in verifiable time and history. Now, why did he do that? Why did he enter into human history? Because he wants you to know him. He wants to be seen. Well, why didn't he come today? Because he's God, you're not. He chooses when he comes to make himself visible and when he doesn't. And that he has chosen one time and not another time is his prerogative. Our task is to reach out to where he has revealed himself and not demand that he reveal himself in a way that I need him to reveal himself. He wants to be known, and he has come in the person of his Son to pay what needs paying so that proud rebels can be forgiven and come back. But more, he did all of this in such a public way and gave a stamp of power that is unmissable in this event by what he did 3 days after the death of Jesus. He raised Jesus from the dead, flesh and bone. Now, if you'll grant the miracle of nothing to something, dead to life is not a big deal. If there's a God who can do that, he can do that. And we have evidences, extraordinary evidences, historical evidences. God didn't do this in a corner. He did it in public so that we could have access to it, we could test it, we can consider it, bring our minds to bear on it, because he's not far from us. Now, God has also revealed himself in other places, in miracles. Some of you testify to extraordinary things that have happened, but do not presume that he must always. Many of us testify to the work of the Spirit in our lives, but do not presume that you will feel that all the time. He has done enough to be known if you want to know him. And I want to finish up, though, by going full on emotional with you. Because this isn't just science. This is about relationship. This is not just academic. There's a great deal at stake, and I want to show you how it all comes together. So I'm going to read this poem and hope I can read it. I struggle at 8:30. I don't know, I'm tired and I'm emotional and I'm just, the feminine in me is coming out, but there we are. Let me read this to you. At the end of time, billions of people were scattered on a great plain before God's throne. Most shrank back from the brilliant light before them, but some groups near the front talked heatedly, not with cringing shame, but with belligerence. Can God judge us? How can he know about suffering? Snapped a pert young brunette. She ripped open a sleeve to reveal a tattooed number from a Nazi concentration camp. We endured terror, beatings, torture, death. In another group, a young black boy lowered his collar. What about this, he demanded, showing an ugly rope burn. Lynched for no crime but being black. In another crowd, a pregnant schoolgirl with sullen eyes. Why should I suffer, she murmured. It wasn't my fault. Far across the plain were hundreds of such groups. Each had a complaint against God for the evil and suffering he permitted in his world. How lucky God was to live in heaven, where all was sweetness and light, where there was no weeping or fear, no hunger or hatred. What did God know of all that men had been forced to endure in this world? For God leads such a sheltered life, they said. So each of these groups sent forth their leader, chosen because he had suffered the most, a Jew, a black man, a person from Hiroshima, a horribly deformed arthritic, a thalidomide child. In the centre of the plain, they consulted with each other. At last, they were ready to present their case. It was rather clever. Before God could be qualified to be their judge, he must endure what they had endured. Their decision was that God should be sentenced to live on earth as a man. Let him be born a Jew. Let the legitimacy of his birth be doubted. Give him a work so difficult that even his family will think him out of his mind when he tries to do it. Let him be betrayed by his closest friends. Let him face false charges, be tried by a prejudiced jury, convicted by a cowardly judge. Let him be tortured. At last, let him see what it means to be alone, terribly alone. Then let him die. Let him die so there's no doubt that he died. Let there be a great host of witnesses to verify it. As each leader announced his portion of the sentence, loud murmurs of approval went up from the throng of people assembled. When the last had finished pronouncing sentence, there was a long silence. No one uttered another word. No one moved. For suddenly, all knew that God had already served his sentence. He has come amongst us. He has lived our life He has suffered in our context and world. He knows what it is. And he came because he wants to call you back. He came because he wanted to pay what needed to be paid for you to come back. He died terribly alone to save us. Could God make himself more visible? He will one day. But he has made himself visible enough, just enough today, so that if you want to reach out and find him, he's there to be found. The evidence is overwhelming if you want to look. And right there's the rub. How much do you want him? This matters because one day we will be before him. We'll have to give an account. And he will say, why did you come here without having found me? And if your answer is, because I didn't want you, then that is the end for you. These things are deeply serious. Do not presume on God. He is God. He makes himself as visible as he's chosen to make himself, to bring to the surface what's happening for us. Let it be the case that you pursue these things sincerely. Let it be the case that by God's grace you actually want to find him, because there's so much at stake. Let me pray. Oh, great God, we're conscious that the more we realise who you are and who we are, you are the creator, we're the creature, the more we recognise of ourselves that we are not owed of you, but we owe you. Please help us come to you in humility, not presuming on you to do what we want you to do all the time, but that we might search out to find you. Please cause it to be the case that those amongst us who don't yet know you might reach out, that you might give them a heart of sincerity to want to genuinely find the evidences. And please, we pray, give them the evidences that are there to be seen. We pray for us that do know you, that you might help us to live in humility before you, thankful for the way you've revealed yourself, trusting that you are real, you are true, you are our God, our only hope. What a world, what a future we have because of you. Amen.
Would you stand with us? This song that we're going to finish with, there's a line that we sing quite a few times, and it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And it points to God being the author of existence, of life, of breath. And when we seek him and we see him as who he is, our response is to reach for him, to live for him, to pour out our praise to him for who he is and his great love to us. Let's do that together now. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out are you, Lord.
Well, what a great morning together. What a great question to press into. Come along next week and every week this January to hear more. For those who have kids in our kids program, we've got a couple of minutes before we need to go and pick them up. You'll see a slide on the screen and hear some music that'll tell you to go. But for everyone, please stick around after church. We've got our carnival on. There's food, there's games. So stick around and keep getting to know each other and chatting. But for now, we'll see you next week.